Okay, so get this right. Like, imagine finding out you're royalty, like a prince or something, and you might even inherit a castle. Sounds pretty amazing, right?
Mm.
But there's a twist. To
Oh.
get your hands on this castle, you got to prove your great-grandpa wasn't exactly uh, best friends with Hitler.
Yeah, that's a bit of a problem.
Talk about some awkward family history, huh?
It really makes you think about how the past can come back to haunt you, even generations later.
Right. So today we're diving into this wild story about Georg Friedrich, Prince of Prussia.
Okay.
And he's trying to get back his family's, lost fortune, a legacy that's all tangled up with the Nazis. And we're talking potentially millions of euros.
Wow.
Our guide for this deep dive is an episode from the Noble Blood podcast. It's called What Crown Prince Wilhelm Left Behind.
I see.
It's full of all sorts of legal battles and family drama, and it really makes you think about how much responsibility we have for what our ancestors did.
That's a tough one.
It is. Okay, so first up, let's meet the main players.
All right.
We've got Georg Friedrich, the current prince. He's a direct descendant of Kaiser Wilhelm II, the last German emperor.
Ah, the Kaiser.
Right. And then there's the Kaiser's son, Crown Prince Wilhelm. His actions during the Nazi era are at the heart of this whole mess.
Okay, so what did he do?
Well, after World War I, Germany lost, and the Kaiser ended up in exile in the Netherlands.
Right.
But Crown Prince Wilhelm went back to Germany in 1923, and that's where things get a little shady.
Shady how?
Well, there are photographs of him at Nazi rallies. He's even wearing a Nazi uniform and saluting Hitler.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, not a good look. So it makes you wonder, was he a true believer in the Nazis, or was there something else going on?
That is the question, isn't it?
It is. Some historians, like Christopher Clark, think Wilhelm might have been playing a more, strategic game.
Oh, okay.
They say maybe he was trying to use the Nazis to get the monarchy back. They point out that he criticized Hitler later on, once it was clear Hitler wasn't going to share power.
So maybe he was just trying to seize an opportunity.
Maybe. But it's hard to argue that when you see the evidence. Historian Peter Brandt says Wilhelm steadily and significantly contributed to the transfer of power to the Nazi Party.
Oh, so he wasn't just a passive observer.
Sounds like it. And this all leads to the legal battle that's going on now.
Right.
Back in 1994, Germany passed a law that lets people get back property that was taken by the Soviets after World War II.
I see.
Seems pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
But there's a catch.
There's always a catch. What is it?
If your ancestors helped the Nazis in a big way, you can't get the property back.
Oh, so that complicates things for Georg Friedrich.
Big time. Now, the question is, what exactly does significantly contributed mean?
Right. How do you even define that?
Exactly. Is it just going to rallies? Or do you have to, be a card-carrying member of the Nazi Party? Or write letters to Nazi officials? The law doesn't really say.
So it's a gray area.
Totally. And that's what Georg Friedrich is dealing with. This whole significant contribution thing is a major sticking point. Figuring out whether Crown Prince Wilhelm crossed that line is, the key to his whole case.
I can see why that would be a problem.
And to make matters worse, he's asking for a lot of valuable stuff back, like the palace that was used for the Potsdam Conference, where they decided what to do with Germany after the war.
Wow, that's a pretty big deal.
It is. And people are not happy about it. This comedian, Jan Böhmermann, even called him Prince Stupid for going after all this stuff.
Ouch. So what's the main issue here?
Well, on the one hand, you've got this family who wants to get back what they think belongs to them. But on the other hand, there's this whole legacy of Nazi collaboration. And it makes you wonder, should anyone be able to profit, even indirectly, from something as awful as the Nazi regime?
Yeah, it's a tough question, isn't it?
It is. And it goes way beyond this one case.
How so?
It makes us think about how we deal with a family history that's stained with something like supporting the Nazis. Can we separate the actual stuff, like art and property,
Right.
from the history behind it? It's complicated.
Really complicated.
So there's a lot more to unpack here.
Okay, what else is there?
Well, let's go back a bit and look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Did you know there's this crazy story about an American colonel who tried to kidnap the Kaiser from exile?
Wait, what? Kidnap the Kaiser?
Yeah, seriously. It's a wild story.
Okay, I'm all ears. All right, so picture this. It's 1920. The Kaiser's living it up in exile, right? At least compared to, what's going on in Germany.
Yeah.
And then you've got this guy, Colonel Luke Lea.
Okay.
He's this kind of flashy American politician and businessman, and he gets this crazy idea. Kidnap the Kaiser.
Kidnap him? Seriously?
Yep. bring him to trial for war crimes.
Wow, talk about a bold move.
Right. Leah thought the Kaiser needed to be held accountable for all the horrors of World War I. He even gets some former soldiers together and sneaks into the Netherlands to try and pull it off.
Wait, he actually tried to kidnap the Kaiser.
He did. The plan involved disguises and a getaway car, the whole 9 yards.
So like a real-life spy movie?
Totally. But it all fell apart, of course.
I can imagine.
The Dutch weren't exactly thrilled about some American colonel kidnapping their guest.
Right, even if he wasn't exactly a welcome guest.
Exactly.
So this Colonel Lee guy, what was he thinking?
Hard to say for sure, but it shows you the kind of crazy stuff that was happening back then. All that chaos and bitterness after the war.
I bet. You know, it makes you wonder if Crown Prince Wilhelm saw all this and felt like, hey, that's my dad they're talking about.
You mean a sense of injustice?
Yeah, maybe even a desire to, restore the monarchy and set things right.
That's an interesting thought. Do you think that could have pushed him towards the Nazis later on?
Maybe. Seeing his dad demonized like that, forced into exile, it's not hard to imagine him being drawn to, like, a movement that promised to make Germany strong again, even if it was a dangerous movement.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But even then, it still comes back to that question of individual responsibility.
How so?
I mean, when does wanting justice for your family turn into supporting something as awful as the Nazis?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's like there's this line, and figuring out where it is, it's not easy.
Especially back then, with all that pressure and uncertainty.
Exactly. It reminds us that history isn't always black and white.
Nope, lots of shades of gray.
So let's get back to Georg Friedrich's case. We know he's after a lot of stuff, but what exactly?
Yeah, what are the big-ticket items?
Well, there's a ton of art, like paintings by famous German artists, historical documents, even furniture that belonged to Prussian kings.
Sounds like he wants a whole museum's worth of stuff.
Right. And one of the most controversial items is the Sicilienhof Palace.
Oh, I've heard of that. Isn't that where they had the Potsdam Conference?
The one and only. Truman, Stalin, Churchill, all decided the fate of Germany right there.
Wow. So what, does he want to live there or something?
Basically, he's demanding the right to live there for free.
For free? Doesn't he have, like, his own castle already?
He does, Hohenzollern Castle, and it makes a lot of money from tourism.
Plus, he's got a couple of wineries and even a private island, so it's not like he needs the money.
Right. So what's the deal? Is he trying to preserve history, or is it just about getting more stuff?
That's the million-dollar question. Maybe he wants to, like, restore his family's name, make them powerful again.
Maybe. But remember what that comedian said? Prince stupid.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it seems kind of tone-deaf to go after all this stuff while your great-grandpa was hanging out with Nazis.
Exactly. It's almost like he's trying to ignore that part of his family history instead of dealing with it.
So what's happening with the case? It seems like it's been going on forever.
It has. Neither side really wants to go to court, it seems.
Why not? Seems like that would settle things once and for all.
Well, going to court is risky. One side wins, the other loses. There's no middle ground.
Ah, I get it. They're both afraid of losing everything.
Exactly. I think back in 2020, they even agreed to postpone the trial for a year to keep talking.
So they're still trying to find a compromise.
Looks like it. But it's a tough situation. The government has to follow the law about returning property.
Yeah?
But they also don't want to look like they're rewarding someone whose family helped the Nazis.
Right. That's a tough spot.
Totally. It's like they're walking a tightrope. And whatever happens could change how Germany deals with its Nazi past, and how they handle these kinds of claims.
It's bigger than just one family then.
Oh, yeah. It's about a lot more than that. It makes us think about responsibility and justice. And it shows how the past can still affect us today.
Wow. So what else is there to this story? What other angles are we missing? You know what's interesting about all this? It kind of ruins that whole fairy tale idea of royalty.
How so?
Well, we tend to think of kings and queens and princes as, like, inherently good, noble, right. But what happens when they do stuff that's, well, not so noble?
Yeah, especially when we're talking about something as horrific as the Nazis.
Exactly. It's like, do those fancy titles even mean anything if you're supporting a regime like that?
Makes you wonder about the whole idea of inherited wealth and power.
Right. It's one thing to inherit, like, a house or a business, but how do you deal with inheriting a legacy that's so messed up?
Especially one that's so closely tied to such a dark part of history.
Yeah, it makes you question the whole thing. And even if we forget about the moral stuff for a minute, there's the practical side.
Like what?
What's Georg Friedrich going to do with all this stuff if he wins?
Yeah, good point. It's not like he needs another castle.
Right. He's already got one, plus wineries, a private island. So is it really about preserving history, or is it just about wanting more money, more power?
Well, that comedian, Jan Böhmermann, had a point.
About what?
It's kind of a bad look, demanding all this valuable stuff while also reminding everyone that your great-grandpa was buddy-buddy with the Nazis.
Yeah, you'd think you'd want to keep that quiet.
You would. It's almost like he's stuck in the past instead of facing up to what happened.
So this whole legal thing, it's been dragging on for years, right?
It has. And neither side seems to want to actually go to court.
Why not? Wouldn't that be the easiest way to settle it?
Maybe, but it's also risky.
How so?
Well, in court, there's a winner and a loser. Someone gets everything, someone gets nothing.
Ah, so they're both afraid of losing.
Pretty much. They'd rather keep negotiating and see if they can find some kind of compromise. I think they even postponed the trial a couple of years ago just to keep talking.
So what's the latest? Any idea how this might end?
It's hard to say. It's a really complicated situation with a lot of factors involved.
So we'll just have to wait and see.
I guess so. But one thing's for sure. This case makes us think about some really big questions.
Like what?
Like, how do we deal with the past? What responsibility do we have for the actions of our ancestors?
And how do those actions affect the world today?
Exactly. It's a story that's both fascinating and, well, a little disturbing.
Definitely. And it leaves us with a lot to think about. What would you do if you were in Georg Friedrich's shoes?
Yeah. Would you fight for this inheritance, knowing what you know about your family's past?
And if you did win, what would you do with it all? Would you try to use it to, make up for what happened? Or donate it to a museum? Or maybe use it to teach people about the dangers of extremism?
Those are all good questions, and they're questions we all need to be asking ourselves, not just in this specific case, but as we think about history and its impact on our lives.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive.
It's been a fascinating discussion.
Definitely. And if you enjoyed this exploration of history and all its complexities, make sure to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more in-depth looks at topics that make you think differently about the world.
We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening.